This happened to me and my friend when we were in our early 20s. I'm now 30, but this event is still fresh in my mind. We were on a back road late at night near a small town called Park Hills, Missouri. We were taking the long way home from an amusement park that was about 2 hours away from where we lived. Until then, the trip had been uneventful. I've always loved being out in the country because of how quiet it can be and how bright the stars are compared to living closer to St. Louis, the city. As such, I would often take detours while driving through rural areas. This allowed me to enjoy myself more than if I'd taken the interstate or highways. It was around midnight when we found ourselves on one of these detours. We had left Six Flags St. Louis for what should have been an hour drive home along Interstate 44 eastbound towards St. Louis city limits. We decided to head south down Highway C off of Highway Z. It looked like it would take us close enough to our destination without much hassle. There wasn't any traffic at that time of night. Not even another car passed by us once we turned onto Highway C. After about 10 minutes traveling south on Highway C, which has very little lighting save for a few scattered farmhouses here and there, we were in Jefferson County, Missouri. The countryside is hilly with occasional patches of forested areas surrounding fields used primarily for farming. The terrain is made up mostly of hillsides with thick vegetation covering them, except during harvest season when crops are grown and tilled soil replaces natural flora. My friend spotted something unusual up ahead near some power lines crossing over the roadway. They seemed to run perpendicular to each other, going north, south, and east-west, respectively. The poles holding transformers were high above the ground, mounted atop wooden supports. They reached almost twice the height of most telephone and utility cables in the nearby area. All other utilities like cable TV, internet service, water, sewer lines, telephone, natural gas, and electricity were delivered to customers in the area. At first, we couldn't tell what it was since the only light came from our headlights, which were still a good distance away. We thought maybe someone had broken down or was having car trouble and pulled off to the side of the road. But as we got closer, I noticed that there wasn't any vehicle parked near where this person would have been standing if they'd gotten out of their car. It looked like a man, but not one who's normal. He stood over 6 feet tall with an unusually muscular build. He was dressed in some kind of uniform similar to military attire, consisting of dark green camouflage patterned clothing, boots, and gloves. All were made of seemingly the same material, fabric texture, and color. His skin was almost reptilian looking, very scaly and rough. It was covered in small, bumpy scales covering every inch of exposed flesh, including his face, neck, hands, and fingers. No hair was visible anywhere on his body, even on the top of his head. He was wearing a helmet that appeared to be part of his outfit, rather than something separate worn for protection like you might see on soldiers, police officers, firefighters, etc. He also held a weapon. I didn't see it clearly, but it appeared to be a long gun-like object slung over his shoulder. He also seemed to have large eyes protruding slightly from his sockets. His face reminded me of something between a lizard and a snake due to the elongated shape. There were no visible ears, nose, or mouth, just small holes where those features should be. My friend and I both got a really uneasy feeling when we saw this person standing there. We didn't know what to do since it was so late at night, and there wasn't anyone else around who could help us if things went south. We decided that our best course of action would be to drive past him as quickly as possible without stopping or even slowing down too much. This way, he wouldn't have time to react before we were out of his reach. As we approached the area where this person stood near the power lines crossing overhead, we realized they weren't alone. Someone else had joined them, another man of the same build, wearing a similar outfit and armed with a weapon. However, he was not carrying a helmet. They seemed to be talking to each other using some kind of language neither my friend nor I understood. It sounded like a series of clicks, growls, grunts, yelps, and maybe howling. I don't remember exactly, just that it made me think it was animalistic in nature. I'm not sure if these two men were friends or enemies, given the fact one looked more reptilian while the other resembled a mammal like a primate. Perhaps he was an ape, monkey, gorilla, chimp, orangutan, etc., based on appearance. He had less scales than the former and was almost fur-covered over his entire body except for his hands and feet. These matched the color of the rest of his exposed skin, namely a dark reddish-brown hue rather than the green scaly tone seen on the first guy. After passing by these two strange men, I glanced back through the rearview mirror to see what they might be doing. I only noticed the second one watching us intently, though I couldn't tell if he was looking directly at us. His eyes and facial expressions were still eerie nonetheless. I also noticed the tall figure walking away from the roadway towards a dense forested area bordering an open field being used for crops. I assume he headed in the direction of the tree line, possibly to return to a campsite or dwelling place. Once we were far enough away from them, my friend and I started talking about what we'd just seen. We were both really freaked out by the whole experience and wanted to get home as soon as possible. We didn't know who these guys were or what they might have been doing out there in the middle of nowhere so late at night, but it definitely wasn't anything good. It was hard for us to sleep that night since our minds kept racing with thoughts about those two men we saw near the power lines crossing over Highway C. We couldn't figure out why anyone would be standing around like that unless they had something sinister planned. I've told a few people this story over the years, but no one believes me. They think I'm making it up because it sounds too far-fetched, especially considering how remote the area is and the lack of evidence to support my claims, such as photographs, videos, eyewitness accounts, etc. Even though I personally experienced the encounter firsthand, I can't deny it happened. All I know is that my friend and I will never forget what happened on that back road outside Park Hills, Missouri, when we came across those two strange men standing near the power lines crossing overhead Highway C in the middle of nowhere late at night. It was one of those experiences that you can't explain, but you know it happened exactly as you remember. In the late 1990s, my mother and father were out for a drive. They were traveling on YM in southern Missouri when they saw something that terrified them to this day. My mom was driving at the time and had slowed down because she noticed what appeared to be a large dog sitting by the side of the road. As she got closer, it stood up and turned towards her car. At first glance, it looked like an extremely large German Shepherd or Husky, but as it stepped into the headlights of their car, they could see that its face was very wolf-like, with pointed ears and long snout. It also seemed much larger than any dog breed known. The creature quickly jumped over a barbed wire fence next to where it had been standing, and then took off running through an open field towards some woods about 100 yards away from where they had seen him originally. The whole thing happened within seconds. As he ran across the field, my parents could see his body shape more clearly. His back legs resembled those of a canine, while his front arms looked more human-like with elbows instead of just being straight limbs like you would find on a dog or wolf. My parents couldn't believe what they just witnessed, so after making sure there wasn't another vehicle coming along behind them, they didn't want anyone else stopping, Dad backed up to get a better look at where this creature crossed over the fence. They both got out and shined flashlights in that direction, but didn't go further because there was still no other traffic on either side of them. They said if whatever this thing was stood upright, which is what I think he did, he would have easily towered over me by several feet. They were both very shaken up and scared after witnessing this event, but knew that nobody would believe them if they didn't get some kind of proof. My mom decided she would go knock on the door of that nearby house while Dad stayed in their car with his gun just in case something happened. She went up to the front porch and knocked on the door. After several seconds, a man answered. She told him what had just happened and asked if he could come outside to see for himself. The man reluctantly agreed, so my mom led him back towards where her car was parked at by pointing her flashlight along the way. When they got close enough, she shined her light down onto the ground near where this creature crossed over that barbed wire fence earlier. It wasn't completely dark yet, but there weren't any footprints because whatever it was stood upright. By now, though, darkness fell across everything except for those few lights coming from my parents' car. The guy looked around for a minute before turning back towards my mom, saying, "I don't know what you guys saw, but I can tell you one thing. If I ever see anything like that again, I'm shooting first." He then turned around without another word, walked back into his house, slamming his front door behind him. Needless to say, my parents left immediately after that. Since then, we have all heard other stories similar to ours about people seeing strange creatures running through fields or standing next highways here in southern Missouri. My parents have seen other strange things over the years, but nothing as terrifying as that night. I grew up in a small town in Missouri. It was 1979, and I was around 8 years old. Several kids lived on my street, and we played together all the time. My house had woods behind it, and there was a creek back there too. We used to go down to the creek and catch crawfish. One day, we decided to take our BB guns with us so we could shoot at things while we were playing by the creek. We walked about halfway down my backyard into the woods when something caught my eye through the trees about 50 yards away from where I stood. It looked like a man walking upright, except for one thing. Its skin color looked pale grayish blue, almost white. I asked one of my friends if he saw what I saw, and he said yes, but then another friend said no. The creature seemed not to notice us as it continued moving slowly through the brush toward our left, parallel with us. After watching this creature move for about 2 minutes, suddenly, out of nowhere, came 3 or 4 large dogs running full speed directly at this creature, barking loudly. The creature quickly turned towards these dogs, which now stopped dead in their tracks after seeing him, her, it turn around. The dogs' tails dropped between their legs as they whined slightly before turning tail and running back from where they had just come. As soon as those dogs ran off, this thing started walking again. It moved very slowly. Never once did it look over at us standing there watching. All 5 of us watched until whatever it was disappeared into some thick brush. There is more. We thought nothing else of this incident until later that evening. My brother and his friend returned home from somewhere, telling me that they found footprints alongside Highway K. They claimed that these prints led across an open field near St. Louis Airport, then onto Lambert International Airport property itself. 2 weeks went by before any talk ever surfaced again concerning this event. I was playing at my friend's house when his mother asked us if we had heard anything about some strange creature that people were talking about in our neighborhood. She told us that her brother-in-law worked for the St. Louis Police Department and had recently seen something similar to what we saw. He claimed it walked on 2 legs, but he never got a good look at its face because it ran off into the woods. We didn't know exactly where he said this happened, but it was within 5 miles of our homes. Then another month went by without any further incidents when my friend's mother came to us again, asking if we had heard anything about the strange creature that people were talking about. She said her brother-in-law was at work and saw this thing in a field near St. Louis International Airport. He told her it looked like some kind of monster with its arms swinging. As it walked through the tall grass, it seemed to be oblivious to his presence. He thought it might have been deaf. Then one night, I overheard my parents talking. My dad said that a woman who worked for him claimed she had seen something out by Highway K where they were building new homes. My mom interrupted, saying that there was also an article in our local newspaper concerning another sighting near Hazelwood, Missouri, which is within 10 miles from our neighborhood. The next day after school, I went straight home. I knew exactly what road this woman took home because she lived just 2 houses down from me. We rode bikes together many times. I waited until around 4:30 p.m., then hid behind some trees across the street from her house, hoping to catch her outside walking up or down Winding Path Drive. After waiting nearly an hour, I decided to leave and go inside for dinner. About 7:30 that evening, my mom and dad were watching the news on TV when they announced a story about some creature being seen by several people in our neighborhood. I jumped up out of my chair and said to myself, I knew it. The reporter went on to say that this thing had been spotted by a police officer while he was patrolling an area near Highway K. He got out of his car and followed what appeared to be footprints across an open field towards St. Louis International Airport. He claimed the prints looked like they came from something very large, walking upright. Then 2 more witnesses reported seeing this same creature crossing Lindbergh Boulevard, which is just 1 mile from where we lived. These people stated that whatever it was moved through traffic at high speeds without ever getting hit. It then disappeared into some woods next to a shopping center. Finally, another witness told how she saw this monster cross over Highway 1270. She said it walked down the median strip as cars swerved, trying not to hit it. The following day, my friend's mother asked us if we had heard anything about the strange creatures being seen all around North County. We told her yes. Then she informed us that there have been numerous sightings, along with tracks found throughout Missouri. I remember feeling frightened because these things seemed to be everywhere. 1 week later, I was riding bikes with 3 friends. They wanted me to take them back behind my house so we could catch crawdads in the creek. As soon as we entered the woods, one of them noticed something shiny laying against a tree. We all stopped and stared for several seconds before approaching closer. My heart started pounding when I realized what it was: a silver spaceship. We ran over excitedly, looking at each other, knowing exactly what this meant. There are aliens living here on Earth, but why? What do they want? Who are they after? On Thanksgiving Day 2019, I went hunting. This is something that I've done for years. My family and friends were all busy with other things, so it was just me this year. It was a beautiful day in the Ozarks, around 60 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny with light winds. I left my house at about noon to head out to some public land near Lake of the Ozarks here in Missouri. When I arrived, there weren't many cars in the parking lot. But when you get back into these areas, most people don't go too far off the trail because they are scared of getting lost or just lazy. Anyway, I walked back along an old logging road for about 2 miles before veering off into a hollow where a couple of small creeks intersected. I had been walking through thick brush for probably half an hour when something very strange happened. My first indication that something was wrong came from my dog, who has always gone hunting with me. He's a border collie mix named Jax, who loves running through the woods, chasing rabbits and squirrels. But today, he wasn't interested in any of those things, as we hadn't seen any game yet. He kept looking over his shoulder like he heard or saw something behind us, but every time we stopped moving, it would stop as well. Eventually, we came upon what looked like either one large track or two smaller tracks, right next to each other going across our path. These tracks were approximately 4 inches wide by 6 inches long, if they were indeed one print, which seemed odd since deer tracks usually measure around 3 inches wide by 4 inches long. After seeing these prints, Jax became even more agitated than before and started growling while staring intently down our path. At this point, I decided that maybe whatever made these prints could be lunch. So instead of continuing straight ahead down the hollow where Jax wanted nothing to do with, we turned right following another creek upstream. We had been walking for about another half hour when I heard a very strange sound coming from up ahead. It was a low-pitched, guttural growl, followed by what sounded like some sort of deep-throated yelping noise. I couldn't see whatever was making these sounds yet, but it seemed to be getting closer because Jax's hair stood straight up on his back and he started barking aggressively towards the source of the noise, which we still couldn't see at this point. Then all of a sudden there was an extremely loud crashing sound that came from behind us in the direction we had just come from. When I turned around to look where it came from, I saw 3 large animals running through the brush away from us. These things were definitely not deer or any other animal that lives in Missouri. They appeared to be covered with short tan fur, and they ran on 2 legs instead of 4. Their arms were longer than ours and hung down, almost touching their knees as they ran. I only got a brief glimpse at them, but they were definitely not human or any animal that I have ever seen before in my life. The strangest thing about them was the fact that they appeared to be completely hairless, which is why I initially thought that they might be some sort of ape or monkey species. They were also much larger than any animal native to this area. I would estimate their height at around 7 feet tall, and each one weighed probably close to 300 pounds. After these creatures ran off, I heard a loud crashing sound behind me. When I turned around, one of them was running straight at us. I quickly raised my rifle and fired one shot, which hit it in the chest. The creature let out an ear-piercing scream as it fell to the ground, but before I could get another round into my rifle, Jax was already running towards it, and I didn't want him to get hurt, so I yelled at him to come back. He immediately stopped in his tracks and ran back to me. We stood there for a few minutes waiting for the creature to move, but it never did, so we slowly approached it. As we got closer, I could see that this thing wasn't an ape or monkey, as its face resembled more of a canine than anything else. I'm not sure what type of animal this is, but if you know, please let me know, because now I'm very curious. The fur on its body was about 1 inch long, all over except for around its eyes, which were completely hairless. Its teeth were extremely sharp and looked like they would be able to rip through flesh with ease. The creature's eyes were also very strange because they were a solid blue color with no pupils. I'm not sure if this is normal for animals or not, but it was definitely something that I have never seen before. After examining the creature, I noticed that its left leg appeared to be broken, which would explain why it wasn't able to get up and run away like the others did. Its arms were extremely muscular and ended in what looked like hands, except there were only 3 fingers on each one instead of 5. The palms of its hands had long, sharp claws, which made me wonder how well these things could climb trees. I've heard stories about creatures similar to this living in forests all over North America, but always thought them to be nothing more than legends told around campfires until now. Now that I know they are real, it makes me question everything else we think we know about our world. These creatures obviously aren't afraid of humans since one charged us, even though we had guns. If Jax hadn't been there barking at them, then maybe they wouldn't have even bothered with us. They don't appear to be hostile towards people either, because none of them tried attacking us except for the one that got shot and injured itself trying to chase after us. Maybe these things are just curious about who is invading their territory as much as we are when hunting deer. I didn't see any other signs indicating that these creatures live in this area, such as dens or nests. So maybe they just pass through here occasionally while traveling somewhere else. This incident has opened my eyes to a whole new reality out there beyond what most people will ever experience. As far as I'm concerned, whatever you want to call these things, dogman, werewolf, skinwalker, doesn't matter, because now I believe without a doubt that monsters do exist.